Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is 10:05. Again, I want to thank some of the new folks that have been subscribing to this channel. We got to about up to about 603 right now, so very cool, and still getting a lot of comments on the videos from folks far and away, and really appreciate people supporting this crazy thing that I do. It's it's a yeah, it's a passion project, labor of love. I love talking about films, and so yeah, it's a super fun thing to do. And I just want to keep it building at a steady pace. Keep doing videos. This week has been a little bit hectic, so I haven't been able to do um, quite as many videos as I normally do, but I've been still doing them. Usually do one a day, and I'm usually always uploading movie review shows as I go and that kind of thing. So today's show is on a movie I was actually really anticipated. I was anticipating big time, and that is the new Guillermo del Toro Frankenstein film that just came out. Got to see it yesterday with some friends at the Strand Cinema in Rockland, Maine. And the cool thing is, it was in 4K. And so the Strand is located in Rockland, Maine, downtown Rockland, Maine, which is a really cool little town. I really love Rockland a lot. The Strand is a magnificent little theater. I had heard it's like a month or two ago that the Strand is the only theater in the state that has 4K capability, or has that they are equipped in 4K, which is pretty remarkable because there is one other area, I think, that there is a higher format. I can't remember what it is, but generally, for the most part, to get from a technical standpoint, the highest resolution, the best sound is really 4K. You can get really great, obvious, really great clarity of picture and sound and all that stuff in, with a really high-end Blu-ray. And then also, I think I'm a big fan of film. Like occasionally, you don't see that anymore, but when something is shown on film, so the ratio is usually always awesome and incredible. I went to the Strand on. No, I think I went to the Strand. The last time I was there for a movie was in August, or yeah, late August. They had a special 50th anniversary of Jaws there, and that was so awesome. It was in 4K as well. They this past weekend, of course, was Halloween weekend, so there were a lot of things going on Halloween weekend. This Halloween was pretty good, better than last year for me, I guess. And there was, a bunch of movies that they were showing at the Strand this past weekend. They had on Halloween night they showed Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho in 4K, and then last night they showed The Birds in 4K. I didn't end up staying. I almost thought about going. After we saw Frankenstein, we went to the 1 o'clock show. One of the little group of friends. We went to the 1 o'clock show, and it was done about 3:30, quarter to four, and whatnot. And then we went out for some beers after, and I talked about maybe going to see the Birds, but then I was like, well, I don't know. The beers kind of made me tired, and I kind of almost hate saying it because I can do a movie marathon really anytime. And I hadn't eaten. That was the biggest factor. Is I was kind of hungry, and I slept like dog shit Friday night, and so I wasn't in the best space. So I ended up not going, but I ended up coming home after we went out for some beers. But uh, Frankenstein, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein was something I was really looking forward to seeing. Overall, I think uh, it was good, and I just chatted with a buddy of mine about Frankenstein, saying that more or less was recommending it because he lives in New York City, and he has a my friend Sean Russell, who is actually a guest on the show. He lives in New York City, and he has a gift card, and he was like thinking about going to see it. I was like, overall, yeah, get a chance. One of the reasons I wanted to see Frankenstein, especially in 4K, which is pretty astounding, was that it was a limited, very limited release that Frankenstein was going to have in the theaters. 2 weeks, I believe. Um, so and it's interesting because Netflix funded the entire movie. They've been working with big directors as of late. I mean, they worked with Martin Scorsese. I think they've worked with a few other directors, I believe, for their bigger productions. And it's crazy because like Martin Scorsese's uh, situation, and I think it might be Guillermo del Toro's situation. They weren't really able to finance their last few projects through the Hollywood system. So Netflix did. So that's pretty inspiring that they would do that. They have the budget to do it. So they were able to give because I know the budget for Frankenstein. I don't know the number, but it was massive, and you can see it on the screen. So it was it's in a limited release. So I do recommend if you get a chance to go and see it and experience it on the big screen, wherever it is, I definitely recommend it. I'm not sure how much longer it's playing. I think it's playing next week, and the plan is, I guess what they're doing is that it's going to be showing um, at a fairly limited release across the country for 2 weeks, and then it's going to go to the streaming service. So definitely worth seeing on the big screen. I mean, but again, I was really anticipating this. I do love Guillermo del Toro. I think a lot of the times he can be kind of hit or miss, though. In all honesty, Pan's Labyrinth being his best film. I did a show about Frankenstein and Guillermo del Toro about my anticipation for this channel. I talked about the trailer and kind of how I feel about Del Toro's career. Again, he's made some films that are absolutely magnificent, and then a lot of movies that are like not so great or just kind of mediocre or a little bit bland or underwhelming. So it's a little bit mixed. So I was a little bit on the fence and a little bit worried about seeing Frankenstein. Some worries and concerns that I had. I don't think Frankenstein is a perfect movie. I will say that. I don't think it is not a Pan's Labyrinth. It's not a Devil's Backbone, which I think those two movies are complete fucking masterpieces, top to bottom. I would not say Frankenstein is a masterpiece. It's got a lot of amazing things about it, and I would say it's probably better than the last few films that he's directed. And I'm definitely recommending for people to see it on the big screen. One of the criticisms I had heard about Frankenstein was that it dragged ass, that it was super boring, and that it was really long. And it clocks in at 2.5 hours, which is, fairly long. But one thing I will say is I did not think that the film dragged ass. I mean, granted, we saw it early at 1 o'clock, so, we're filled up with popcorn and soda at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but so it's very early. You're usually fairly awake that day, if you're a human being. But one thing I will say that was a really big positive, I did not think that this movie was too long. I never checked out as far as like the length. Feeling like, okay, let's wrap it up, folks, or getting uncomfortable in my seat. I was engaged for the whole time, and I felt the pacing was pretty good, and I never felt like it was boring. I guess it moved along pretty well. It definitely moved along pretty well. The Some of the visual aspects of this movie are absolutely incredible. Some of the visual aspects of the movie I thought were a little bit disappointing. And and again, what do I know? My tastes are up my ass. I watch a lot of movies, and I love movies. That's all I base it on. I'm not an expert, but I felt like, and again, what I try to do when I'm doing these shows is I don't do like a lot of times for YouTube guys or girls. They do the out of theater experience where they run out of the theater and then turn on their phone or their camera and they instantly talk about the film and review it. I don't really feel like that's fair because I mean, yeah, there's times where something really hits you or something really disappoints you, and it's like, oh, that was a terrible experience, or that was amazing, or that was okay. And sometimes I rely mostly on my kind of gut instincts, and I usually find in my experience that that is usually what sticks with me. Sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised and it's different, but often not. But I like to sit with a movie, especially something like this, where it's very rich. There's a lot of detail, and and of course it's a classic book. So I like to sit with a movie for 24 hours, let it resonate. Wake up the next day, see if I'm thinking about it, and then see if I'm like not really thinking about it or not craving to see it again, or if I am craving to see it again. Just kind of letting it resonate for a while. And it stuck with me pretty well. As far as like I was saying before, like visually, some things about it that were really good, and some things I thought were not so great. There is a tremendous amount. Like one thing I will say, you can tell that Guillermo del Toro put his blood, sweat, and tears into this film. It was truly a passion project for him, and you can tell he put a lot of love and care into this movie. You can really get that sense, and you see it on the screen for the most part. Some of this, and I think it's fairly blurred the line, but there's definitely a lot of practical sets in this movie. There's a lot of practical effects, if you will, and there's a huge amount of CGI in this movie. So there's a huge uh, percentage of that, probably more so than practical. And so, for the most part, I think you can't really tell. It's blurred pretty well, and it looks pretty real. It looks like it's fairly seamless. There are certain things that happen around I guess, the action where it does seem a little bit like there are other creatures or animals in the film, and to me, they looked really, really fake and really, really CGI. The opening sequence to this movie is pretty breathtaking and pretty amazing, and just an incredible action sequence that looked pretty flawless. But there are other things that happen with other characters in the action, and then particularly around other creatures or animals and things that happen around that look really, really kind of artificial, and you can kind of tell that it's like purely CGI. So it's a little bit off-putting, but I don't think it was enough to like take me out of the movie. And there are certain big scenes that you can kind of tell that no, that's just too perfect looking, and it doesn't look. It looks a little bit artificial. And I had commented to one of my friends after the movie that I was kind of comparing like the visual element to Frankenstein, to comparing it to Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. And I felt like I said to him that I felt the design and the because there was tons of practical effects in Robert Eggers' films, and I think most of it was was that. But there are also quite a few scenes in that movie where it is CGI. And I told him that I felt like that film probably has a little bit more. I felt was more seamless as far as using those elements. But it wasn't enough to take me out of the movie, I will say. And the cast was pretty good in this film. Oscar Isaac, Mia Goth, pretty fantastic as far as that stuff goes. The other cast. And so the cast, Jacob Lordy, who plays Frankenstein's monster, Mia Goth, Oscar Isaac, Christopher Waltz, Felix Kramer, Ralph Ineson, and Charles Dance is in this, which I love Charles Dance. I love him to death. He's so fantastic. But again, cast is pretty good. The characters are good. Um, I will say, the movie is some of the dialogue and some of the writing for this movie. I will have to say is just kind of I don't know how else to describe it. How else to really describe it? I think some of the dialogue and kind of the cliche thing about the story, or at least the way it's told, it just is really silly and really goofy and really like there's a sense of when you're watching this movie that you're not really like you can't find out what the film or what they're saying or what this is happening on your own terms. It feels like they're always telling you like, okay, this is what you should feel or this is what's going to happen. And it's so obvious. There's no room of like letting it unravel and finding out these things on your own. It's like kind of heavy-handed. It's on the nose with the dialogue. And some of the dialogue is like wicked corny, like wicked cheesy, wicked cheesy. There's a couple of moments where it was like, ugh, like. But I will say there are also moments in the dialogue that I think are really poetic, really beautiful, and really, really rich. So it's kind of mixed, and I don't know. I don't think I wouldn't say the really kind of corny, silly aspects of the dialogue or the kind of the on the nose kind of approach took me out of the movie necessarily. It's a little bit like, but I will say it's a little bit silly and a little bit like. There were a couple of moments where I was watching it and I'm like, and some of these things would kind of unfold that way, and I was like, it kind of made me wince a little bit, and it made me look away. It was a little bit like, oh God, that was like as cliche as you possibly can be, and so on the nose. And I don't really want to be told like right away that okay, this is a love scene or this is an action scene or this is how I should feel. The story should be able to express that without being so I don't know, forthright. But again, there's a balance. I think there are scenes in the film that where the writing there's a few scenes with the writing and the characters that I think is kind of brilliant and pretty amazing and beautiful and poetic and it's rich. And I do think it does really remind me of the classic book itself by Mary Shelley. So I don't think it was like overall bad enough to take me out of the movie, but there are some really clunky parts. But again, what do I know? I did like the Frankenstein monster creation for the most part. I thought it was pretty interesting how that was portrayed. There are, again, it's very similar to the book, but there is a lot of newer things added to it, especially kind of towards the end, which I thought were pretty cool. One of the things that is a little bit weird, but overall I was kind of along for the ride is there's so much emphasis on understanding the Frankenstein monster character where uh, there's a couple of scenes of where it's really heavy-handed and that they're trying Del Toro was really trying to make you empathetic towards him. and really kind of humanize him in this way, which was, I can understand that, and it was cool because, like, in the book, his body parts and his brain and everything, are assembled from people who were murderers and criminals. So he's a really fucked up, murdering kind of killing machine in the book. And then in the story, they definitely he try. I mean, there is that element, but they try to really make him into this, I don't know, lovable character in a way, or somebody who has like a lot of empathy. Like there's one scene of where he's like, again, it's a really bad scene, I think, along those lines of where he's like actually feeding these animals and stuff, and it's like, it's really like, feels like a Disney moment or something, and it's like, and again, in the book, he's a very torn character, obviously, because he's learning about the world and his who his creator is, and he's doesn't know what existence is and what life is, so he is struggling to understand. But at the same time, he is this monster. So there's a fine line with that. And I think these things in the film that I've criticized are the things that I would say, don't let this film. Those reasons are the reasons I'm giving is why I would say this movie is not on par with like Pan's Labyrinth or like The Devil's Backbone or even Hellboy, which is a really great film. Um, I would say it's close, but it is not. It's not at that level because it is. It's a good movie, but it's flawed, and I think there are things about it that are a little bit silly, a little bit too self indulgent, and the other thing too, the movie got this movie got really criticized for being the two things I heard about it as far as negative kind of reviews or buzz about Frankenstein was that it was um, too long, boring, and it dragged ass. And then the other thing was that this movie was so over the top and so serious all the time. And I don't think in my experience, I didn't think it dragged ass at all. I think it moved along considering really well the pacing and everything. So I didn't agree with that. And then there is more humor in this movie than I thought too. Yeah, it is. It is very over the top. It is. It has that kind of Shakespearean kind of vibe. But that's kind of what the story is, and that's kind of how the writing is, and that was kind of the place that Mary Shelley was coming from. So it kind of makes sense. It does have that factor, but I don't know. It wasn't enough to where it ruined it to me. I think an example of that where it did ruin it for me is the Kenneth Branagh Frankenstein with Robert De Niro who plays Dracula. That movie was so fucking over the top and so serious all the time that it was just like so extreme that it's kind of like ridiculous. This movie does have that, but there is some pretty funny moments in it. It does have more comedy in it. It doesn't take itself as serious as the Kenneth Branagh version, I would say. Um, I think it's better than the Kenneth Branagh version. I definitely do. But it's not perfect. I don't think that this is. I was talking about that with someone about, like for me, as far as like classic monster movies, especially like, the Universal monsters, Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Like, I think there are examples of like the quintessential movies that represent those characters, like Bram Stoker's Dracula, uh, by Coppola, and now in first place is Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. Like, I feel like as much as I love Coppola's version, which is a masterpiece, I actually love Edgar's version better. But I think it's like a definitive. Like at the end of the day, it's like the definitive version of that character Dracula. And I think when it comes to werewolves or the Wolfman, and I know it's a little bit of a different thing, but I still consider it that. I think for werewolf movies, there is that definite thing, you know. Not so. I mean, the classic Lon Chaney movie is still amazing, but you know, with the werewolf genre, I think there is that. You know, with like movies like The Howling, which is probably is my favorite, and then you know, An American Werewolf in London and Silver Bullet, all the great Paul Nash movies. Like there's definitive versions of that character, or that monster, you know, that monster. Um, and definitely with the Creature from the Black Lagoon, like there's the definite version of that. And there hasn't been. I feel like there are so many editions, so many versions of Frankenstein, but I honestly don't think there's been that kind of representation of that character that's on par with those other films. And I feel like, well, this is pretty darn close, pretty darn close, but I don't think I could say it's the definitive version. Another example for that it would be the Batman with Robert Patterson. Robert Pattinson. I'm a huge fan of the Christopher Nolan films, of course, and the Tim Burton films. But the Robert Pattinson version, again, there's so many Batman movies, but the Robert Pattinson for me is like the definitive version. And I don't know. This is the best. I think it's the best one, best adaptation as far as a big budget version of Frankenstein. To be fair, but I still don't think it's like, I don't think it's as good as like Nosferatu or American Werewolf in London, or you know, or the Batman. Like I don't look at it as, I don't put it on that Mount Rushmore of epic tellings of a classic story, monster or hero.
Towering.
I wouldn't say it's up there with that. It's really darn close, and I do think as far as big budget films tackling, you know, the iconic monster of Frankenstein, it's probably the best one. So I do recommend it. Especially on the big screen, like without a doubt. But it's got its issues, but overall I enjoyed it. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.